Well, hi there and welcome to another episode of Insights with NetSupport. I'm Mark Anderson, Head of Education at NetSupport, and I'm really looking forward to a conversation today with somebody who I've been having lots of emails backwards and forwards and getting prepared for this conversation today. Someone who has lots of experience in education. As always, I don't really want to steal this person's thunder, but is doing an awful lot about improving and supporting engagement in learning. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto Insights today the one, the only Mr. Alan Cowley. Welcome, Alan. How are you doing?
Well, I feel so much better for that introduction. Thank you so much. But thanks, Mark, and it's great to meet you and to be part of Insights.
Thank you very much for joining me for the conversation. For those who haven't met you before, Alan, could you share a little bit about who you are and a bit of your experience in education?
Yeah. I was 34 years as a teacher and school leader in secondary schools in the UK. Got into my passion, parental engagement, in the early noughties when I was sent on a course, actually. The head said to me, Alan, there's a course on parental engagement. I'd like you to go and see what it's about. And the big catch-all was, and there's some money that we can get from this as well. So exactly the big hook. And so I went along. We were doing parental engagement, as every school is doing parental engagement. I thought we were doing it particularly well. Sat down, listened to these two professors from Warwick University talking about what parental engagement really is and what the outcomes could be. I felt so stupid. I thought, this is shocking. And when they got to the bit that said, this can improve pupil outcomes 25% year on year, and I had colleagues in my school then who were going off with stress and they were good teachers, great results, but crucifying themselves in order to squeeze 1 or 2 percentage points out of their target grades. And I thought, what are we doing? If there's 25% sitting there going begging, why are we crucifying teachers? So that was the driving force behind what I was doing. And it was really before well-being became, and workload became a major issue. On the basis of that, the Specialist Schools and Academies Trust, they gave me a couple of positions as a lead practitioner. One was for parental engagement, one was for community engagement. And I became part of the EPRA campaign, Engaging Parents in Raising Achievement. That was fascinating. I was keynote speaker at many of those events. In 2008, the mantle of parental engagement was handed over to BECTA. And for those of you who don't know what BECTA was the government's agency for all things EdTech. And I was invited on an 18-month secondment to provide the parental engagement element of online reporting to parents, which I thought brilliant. Yeah, love the idea of this, until I saw what they had planned. And I realized that basically the plan was to provide parents with what they were already getting on paper and not understanding or reading, and providing it online. And guess what? That's what happened. Parents engage with online reporting less and less as the years go by, and it can turn parents off.
That's really interesting, Alan. So you went on this course and you thought you knew what parental engagement was, and you heard from these professors from Warwick about what parental engagement actually is. You then have gone away and thought about it in some more detail and what have you. But if this is a common misconception, what was it that you thought parental engagement was, and what actually is good parental engagement?
I was no different to any other leader within a school. We are quite convinced that parental engagement is all the stuff we do with parents. And that's actually what we found when my wife and I started the consultancy and we were in schools giving parental engagement courses. We'd always use those opportunities to talk to the leaders. And one theme that emerged very quickly actually rubber stamped my own experience. And that is that I and my colleagues across the country use the phrases parental engagement and parental involvement interchangeably to mean all the stuff we do with parents. And that is how we see parental engagement. We see it as, when you look at the functionality on your parental engagement tool, and I'm talking now to any school leaders listening through the audience, and there'll be a considerable number of you. Have a look at the functionality. It's always the same. We can't do without it because we've learned to live with it, and it increases our efficiency in schools. It is cost effective, but it all features around school admin. So dinner money, booking your parental engagement meeting. I could go on. There are about 12 different things, different functions that are constant across most of those products. And helping with homework goes in there sometimes. I'll come back to that one later if you can remind me. But those things enable the parent to support the school in some way, to make life easier for the school, which is great. We need that, and we can't do without it. But that's parental involvement. Parental engagement, to give it its fuller title, is parental engagement with their children's learning. Learning, not schooling. And when you go into that a bit deeper, you find that that is at the heart of where we're missing out. I like to say, and it will be the title of my book when I write it, it's a matter of mistaken identity. We think we're doing it. It looks like it's parental engagement, but actually it's not. And so working out how you can change a school's approach to parental engagement, that was a tough ask. It took us a long while to work out if we want to change something, if we want to change schools as an approach to something, what did we have to do? What did we have to ensure? And
so what does that look like then, Alan? As you know, I've got two teenage children myself. They go to a secondary school. The school has class charts. You'll be aware of class charts, and I can go onto their class charts account and I can see if they've behaved well in a lesson, if they've got any homework set, if they've been poorly behaved in a lesson, and if I want to follow up, I can contact the school. Is that parental engagement, or is that parental involvement, or is there more to it?
It's involvement. It's involvement because, yes, it is loosely connected with your children's learning, but in an indirect sort of way. There is something more fundamental about the way that parents interact with their children, that the way we operate in schools totally ignores. We forget it's there. It's not surprising. I've done 34 years in school. 34 years under your belt is a long time. I'd have done more, because at the time I was doing it, throughout my career, for me, it was the best job you could ever have. It was absolutely wonderful. But you can get stuck as a profession in doing it this way because it's the way it's always been done. And that is the key thing. So certainly our relationship as a profession with parents has changed over the decades. And I'm going back even before my experience. And it's a lot of that has just been kept, and some of it has morphed. So when you look at the way we communicate with parents, which for many schools is still paper-based, in the 21st century, parents don't process the stuff we send home on paper particularly well. So newsletters, things like that, I know it's quite often the first call. Twitter accounts. Lots of schools have Twitter accounts. You talk to parents about Twitter accounts. If their kid's not featured, they want to know. It's interesting, but you're not going to dwell on it. You don't look forward to it. You don't relish it. And it's that power that the relationship between parent and child has. I'll come back to that we're missing out on. We're not getting the best of it. So to go back to your question, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? When you look at the research on parental engagement, and there's a considerable amount, and it all leads in the same direction. Of course, academics will tell you what it is, but they won't tell you how to achieve it in schools. That's one thing that they don't go into. So the one thing that can improve a child's performance in school is, and I quote from Sui Chu and Wilm's research in 1996, it's when parents have regular conversations with their children at home about learning. That's it. That's what does it.
So how do you... So that's really interesting, Alan. It just brings... Obviously, as a parent myself, I know quite a bit about learning. I'm a teacher, I'm an education professional, but surely part of the picture then, or part of the jigsaw puzzle, must be working with parents to help them understand pedagogy, what is learning, how to best support their child. Is that part of the equation?
No, not at all. Not at all. And this is the beautiful thing, because what you said there is the automatic assumption that school leaders and teachers have, and they throw up their hands in horror and say, "Oh my goodness me, we're already worked off our feet." No. Well, yes, because one of the things that we did with that research was look at what Sue Chu and Wilms were saying there, and regular conversations with your children about school and learning. Okay. I knew, and I could write a very long list of parents who, when they had a conversation with their children about school, would say things like, "Don't listen to Cowley. Why would you want to listen to him? He was like that when he taught me." Okay. That's a conversation. It's about school, about learning. But it's not a good one. It's not going to influence the child in a positive way. So what we've said, and what we've introduced into this, is we've got to enable parents to have positive conversations. Positive conversations. To cut a story lasting nearly a decade down to the nub of what we found out, which is the key thing, is how do you enable those positive conversations without killing teachers? And I mean that in a figurative way as well as a literal way. You've got to be able to deliver an initiative that brings the results that are promised by the research without a detrimental impact on the teaching profession. And that's what we've done. That's what we've found. And it's backed up by the evidence and by its own research now done independently by one of the leading academics in the field of parental engagement.
That's really interesting, Alan. Thank you. You're the CEO at Engagement in Education. This is your business, your consultancy. So can you dive in a bit and explain sort of the work that you do? Because I understand you've got a product that sort of ties in around this. Because certainly with your experience working with BECTA and your conversations with Jim Knight, you must have something particularly useful and helpful for schools.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I'm very mindful of what we've got and how we deliver it. Essentially, what we looked at. So when you look at how you save teachers work, I hate to think of the number of hours I spent as a teacher. And I left the profession just as online reporting to parents was being used, because of course it was being used in schools in the beginning of the noughties, and my school was one that used it. It flourished even more so, especially in secondary schools, after I'd left the profession. But report writing, what a waste of space that was. What was that about? We're looking at summative reporting. And you will know, and people probably listening to this interview will know, and if you don't, you do now, that when you write a report, in the report writing process, from start to finish and issue to parents, about 6 weeks has gone by. So things change. We wanted something that was more immediate. We wanted something that was understandable to parents because, gosh, again, I've lost count of the number of parents and my relatives who have contacted me and said, Al, I just got this report from Gemma's school. Can you just tell me, please, what do they mean when they say this? Right? What's the point? It's got to be something parents understand because it's to them. When we looked into it, we were still using basically the same formula. And I've got a wonderful slide I can show you on this. It's Winston Churchill's report from 1883. And the format of the report is virtually the same as schools are using now.
Yeah.
1883, what are we doing? 150 years, for goodness sake. Why? Because we've always done it that way. There is no good reason for that. So we looked at, if we're going to report to parents, what can we give parents that will enable them to support their children's learning? And that is where we went. Lots of brain work going on. When we hit the answer, I can remember it well, we were driving up the A1 coming back from a course that we've been delivering down in Peterborough. And my wife and I constantly talked about this. That makes us sound very boring. Please excuse me. We're not that bad. But when we said, hang on a minute, is that all you have to do? Would that do the job? Because we wanted to replace what schools are doing for reporting to parents. It's time consuming. It's extremely time consuming when you think how little it is understood by parents. So it's a waste of time. I know online reporting to parents clears a lot of that work out for teachers, but actually it's made things worse for parents. It's divorced them even further from the school. And we can perhaps see some form of impact of that as part of the problem from what's going on in education at this moment in time with attendance. That might well be one of the factors. But there are 5 things we have to report on in that statutory responsibility we have: attendance, achievement, attainment, behavior, and SEND. What we did was look at how we could inform parents about their child's learning. So not giving them a grade.
Mm-hmm.
Grades don't change. So why am I looking at this bit of paper? What's in it for me? How can I use that to have a positive conversation with my child? Oh, so you're still on a GCSE 4 grade. Oh, you're still on a 4 grade. You know, how do you have meaningful conversation around that? You can't. And how do you do it without creating work for teachers? And then it hits us that teachers are already doing the achievement and the attainment. And they're commenting on it to the pupils on a daily, weekly basis. When you feed back to children about what they've been doing. When you look at what those conversations are like between parent and child, we have a thing in education. I'll rephrase that. We used to have a thing in education where it was a graduate profession. We can no longer afford to do that for teacher numbers and financially. But why do we think that in enlisting the support of parents to help with homework, have we forgotten who these parents are? Some of them will manage it very easily. But I'll guarantee you now, Mark, if I walk into any school in this country, and with the ones I go into, I'm often shown around, we go into classrooms, and I'll guarantee you I will see differentiated work going on. And yet, when those children leave school and start their own families, schools send them all the same information. It's not differentiated at all. And it's the same with the work we send home. So it's no wonder we're turning parents off when we're giving them things they can't do. When you look at the research on parental engagement, it says it will work for any parent, regardless of their social background or experience of education. We're falling short on that at present. So, what's the big thing? What is this magic formula that is the parental engagement? And this is one of the things which this is the first. You probably haven't got this anywhere else going out. There's been some brilliant research that's come through in the last few years. I had an email from Harvard and Yale as a joint email about some research they did in 2018. Came out on Valentine's Day 2018. And it was about how they had taken electrodes and placed them on a baby's head, and then put the nurturer in front of that baby. And I've just become a grandfather again, so this is wonderful because it's my behaviour. I will look at Esme, who is just a week old, and yesterday I had a conversation with her. Now, she hasn't got a clue what I'm talking about, not a clue. But my goodness me, when the eyes lock onto you, there's something going on, and those conversations become meaningless babble, probably as far as the child's concerned, what they're hearing, but certainly coming back to me. The point being, communication is taking place. And what they've found is that as soon as that is happening, regardless of the age of the child, the centers of the brain that deal with language and learning fire up. They're growing straight away. It's amazing. And that's what we want. That is what parents bring to the party. They bring the motivation and the interest and the learning that grows the brain in the right areas. Further evidence of this, and this, my wife spotted this, when we first started, we're in schools in the Northeast, and we were recording interviews with people who were using freeflowinfo. we asked the question, what do you want to tell us about free flow info? Now, my background being in psychology as well, I can't cook things. I can't cook the books. I've got to present things as they really are. That's how we work. So I asked every interviewee what they wanted to say. And then together we worked out, so what would the question look like that you'd ask for that? And then I'd say, right, so does this question sort of lead you to answer what you want to talk about? Yes. So that's what we did. I was going through the responses and editing out the dross, as you'll be doing what I'm saying now very shortly. But my wife said, she was in the background, she said, are you hearing one phrase more than anything else? And I said, what's the phrase? I'm not picking up anything. She said, proud. The word proud is being used. How proud the grandma is of them. How proud their parents are of them. How proud they are of what they're doing. And I'd missed it. I'd missed it. But no longer do I miss that. What's more, I see it everywhere I look. So here you go. Just look out for it, folks. Next time you're watching MasterChef or Sewing Bee or whatever it is, one of those programs with celebrities in it, ordinary people in it, someone will say, virtually every week, oh, my mum would be so proud of me if she could see this. What? You're 46. What do you mean your mum will be proud of you? Yes, because it works throughout our lives. This is something that is inbuilt into human beings. Parental approval. Now, take that as being what we in schools have to give parents. Parental approval of what their child is doing in school. Something good they've done. And, I know you've got kids. I guarantee you, Mark, if one of your kids came home from school and before they got home, you had received a photograph from one of my lessons that showed a keyboard with a fountain pen right on it, a pencil, a quill, perhaps, a biro, and that was it. No word of explanation, just that. Whoops, sorry, I've nearly knocked myself off the table. I'll guarantee you, the first thing you would ask your child when they got in from school would be, "Oi, why am I getting this photograph of a keyboard and a quill and a pen? And what's going on?" Right? The very fact that a parent is asking that question shows that they are interested in what the child is doing in school. It's as simple as that. And there are so many instances during the teaching day, teaching week, where teachers do things in classrooms and pupils, as a result, have some great learning experiences in a myriad of different ways. So it could be something that we've done draft 1, you had your feedback, we get draft 2, and there's an improvement. Goodness me, progress in learning, right? You can actually see it as a parent. You don't have to have someone say, well, it's all part of this grade to do with it. No, that's what it is.
Absolutely.
So capturing some of that, because you're already doing it. If it's been marked, you've already done it as you would have done it normally. Capturing some of that actually provides those positive conversations. And so what we've done is make it more complicated than that, because what we don't want is to kill teachers. But teachers, and this is another difference to our initiative, teachers sit down in a training session that we run, or the leaders run for us, and they identify in the next half term elements in their schemes of work that will show progression in learning. It might be some form of physical activity or performance activity. God, English, speaking and writing. I did PE, I taught drama. And then I tried to describe in words what a child was doing. Show them. We've got video. Show them. There's that. It could be skill development. I mean, you've mentioned when you're talking about class charts, behavior. There's a terrible tendency in schools. But when we talk about behavior, we mean bad behavior. Right. Well, it's not. The vast majority of behavior is good. And so I might have a group discussion going on around a table. And I can say, as a teacher, I can do a voiceover. I can write it. But I can say, Mark did a brilliant job of organizing that discussion. He allowed everybody into the conversation, give everybody time to talk. That's behavior. I am commenting on behavior when I write something like that, and it's useful stuff because it's skill development. So it might be some enrichment activity you have going on. It could be a trip out, a guest speaker in. Actually, in the system that we have, the pupils capture it. Teachers can, but and it's a difficult thing to get through to teachers because many of them want to do it all for the pupil. Back off a little bit, identify what's going to be uploaded. So they are the ones who control how many and when. There's obviously going to be someone sitting on the senior team who is going to look at those lists to make sure that parents are getting a good cross-section right across all subjects of information that they want for those conversations that fall within those 5 categories. And the children upload it to their portfolio on our product. And we're talking about 4-year-olds to 19-year-olds.
It's great when you can get children engaged in doing these sort of things. I'm a big advocate for that sort of thing myself, Alan. I wanted to sort of say, I think the whole, doing things with parental approval, regardless of any sort of products. A good example of that with my own children is when they just rush home after they've been doing some work in food technology. They've made some scones, or they've baked a cake, or they've made a pizza. And all they want you to do is try it and eat it yourself and get that sort of thing going on. It sounds fantastic that you've got a product that enables not just recording of things like pizzas being made and cakes and all the rest of it, but a whole raft of other things as well. I think you might mention a name a little bit earlier, Alan. Was it freeflowinfo? Is that right?
freeflowinfo. So FREEFLOWINFO. And what you're just describing there is important, because we realized that sending parents the report was rather like Winston Churchill's sending the Victorian mail, probably, a spreadsheet, or whatever it's going to be, just a list of grades and things. Life's a bit more different than that these days. So what we've done, and we built this into the software. And when I say we, I'm not talking about me, because I'm a bit klutzy when it comes to technology. I use people who know what they're talking about to deliver what I want them to deliver. And one of the things that I was very keen on from the outset was that some great research, and it's totally accepted across the world. Teachers find it hard to grasp, but 20% of our learning takes place in schools. 80% takes place elsewhere, and it's informal. With that in mind, the school report is a pretty thin document. So what we wanted was something that could be used beyond school by the pupils to demonstrate what they can do. And that is quite straightforward, because if 80% of your learning takes place out of school, our system allows parents to upload photographs and short videos that show short clips of out of school learning. And they could be participation in a sporting event, an arts event, a cultural event. They might be speaking a language that is not English or from the British, palette. But they're nevertheless engaged in speaking another language, which is something quite, a skill to be had. It could be making that pizza, not at school, but in the kitchen at home on a Friday night. It could be something like that.
Yeah.
What a lot of teachers are finding is that they are seeing learning that takes hold of what they've done in school. So something that was been school-based learning, and applying it in different circumstances. So in other words, it's deep learning that they're seeing because they've got it and they're using that skill and that understanding in other situations. And that is uploaded. It can be seen by the school, but it's also enshrined as a permanent part of the child's learning record. Nothing is thrown away. One of the points that we have with our product is that no upload is ever deleted unless it's dodgy. And we've never had that, I have to say, but nothing's deleted. So the main element in our costs is storage, but it's worth it because it works. And the other thing which I'll mention now is that out of school, there are 5 people who can see every upload a pupil makes. We classify them as 2 parents and 3 supporters. Supporters can be grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings, anyone who's close enough to the child to want to help support their learning. And because modern families aren't that neat and tidy, it could be 3 parents and 2 supporters, 4 parents and 1 supporter, or where a child needs anything extra, we just give them the link because that's the important thing. So there we've got family learning and family support. And let's face it, those of you who are in schools will see grandparents turning up to pick up children from school, perhaps if it's a primary school. It's the wider nuclear family is having more to do with rearing children than previously.
Thank
that's
you,
what we've been able to.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question, if it's okay. Particularly in independent schools, and I want to dive into this expectation that parents have about receiving a report on their child's progress, a summative report at end of school. In the independent sector, particularly, I've sort of seen over the years, there is this expectation. This is what I've paid for. I want a summative report. If I'm not getting a report, then what am I paying you for? These sort of, I can well imagine these sort of conversations going on, and senior leaders in those sort of establishments being under an awful lot of pressure to make sure that they establish the status quo. Now we've heard I think it's Abdul Chauhan who talks about them being the sort of 6 most expensive words in education, which we've always done it this way. But given that the evidence bears out that it isn't as impactful as it could be on children's progress, it's more for the parents and their expectation than it is to actually support the child. What advice would you give to school leaders who may be facing those sorts of challenges when obviously we've got the issues around staff workload? If it isn't doing anything other than actually perhaps reinforcing not the ego, but the expectation of parents who've only known this way of actually receiving. How can we support that sort of conversation with school leaders, Alan?
Yeah, this is interesting because when we first introduced this, coming straight off the back of the online reporting to parents involvement I'd have with BECTA, I just want to change the world. Yeah, but let's do it now. No, hold your horses. Hold your horses. What Professor Janet Goodall, who conducted the independent academic research on behalf of the DFE for our project. One of the findings there, and we already saw this coming through, was that some head teachers are more canny than I was. And what they were doing was introducing free flow info. So you still got your report, it's still there. What teachers and what Janet's research shows is that the process of free flow info itself, without it being the annual report to parents, the process itself reduces teacher workload through the methodology that we introduce. The methodology is flexible. There are not two schools who use free flow info in the same way. It can be morphed, which is the phrase that one of the CEOs of a big mat uses to describe why he likes it so much. It can be morphed by each establishment, which is important. But what we have is a framework, which is the framework that you would expect from a good teacher or better in a classroom in feeding back to the children. It's not onerous. It actually cuts back on workload. And this is from Janet's research. So we follow that measure. So in using it alongside your traditional method of reporting to parents, you are actually still reducing teacher workload. The point being that what you're also doing as having your terminal summative report is that you've got a formative report. It's an annual report that takes about 10 months to deliver. That's how I describe it. So each week, perhaps 4 pieces of work, 5, the school decides, it's up to them. They invariably end up slightly increasing things when they see how easy this is. It is at least workload neutral for teachers. It can reduce it. And parents, when they get to the end of your report, start saying, well, what do we need this for? And that is the way to go with it. You can do it from scratch. You can do it from scratch, or you can do it the savvy way that head teachers use, which is you convince, just show when people see it, parents love it. I mean, just looking at some of the figures, 84% of parents, this is from Janet's research, not mine, 84% of parents say they're now having more positive conversations with their children about learning. That's a massive amount. 74% of all parents say that they now feel better able to support their children's learning. And it is not just subject-based. We've got to get away from that idea. Schools are obsessed with it. It's not about subject-based. It's about giving kids the resilience that they need to look at something again and see how they can improve it. And it certainly is. I mean, there's a list of about 12 things that parental engagement has been identified as giving a school and a child over the last 20 odd years of research. Every single one of them, every single one of those benefits was identified in Janet's research. And the big question people are going to come back to me on is, so are you saying it's going to be 25% improvement in learning year on year? You'll know John Hattie's research that says it's like adding another 2 or 3 years to a child's education. What Janet is saying is that 90% of the teachers who use free flow info say it undoubtedly improves their pupils' academic performance. That's a massive number. And it's a number we cannot, as a profession, we cannot afford to ignore. And it's simple. And it's free because it's coming from the parents. It's just enabling them to do the bit they will naturally want to do. It improves
That's
relationships. 74% of parents say that it's improved their relationship with teachers. 78% of teachers say it's improved their relationship with parents. We have this thing that I forget which think tank it was, did a survey about a year ago, I guess, not quite. I think they got teachers had to do it. They asked for words that express what teachers thought of parents. The one word that featured more than any other in that survey was fear. Now that's an independent thing, but it reinforces the research that says the same thing, not using the same word necessarily, but it's a distrust that parents have. That teachers have. Teachers have a concern about mixing with parents. You don't have to. And just taking the workload reduction thing and away from the thing, all of the training for parents for freeflowinfo is on YouTube videos on our YouTube channel. So you don't have to have a parents consultation evening. It's there already. It gets round. We usually have champions, staff champions in schools who nurture the rest of their teams in the adoption. We don't expect it to take place overnight, but we do expect it to happen across the school because we're dealing with parents. And it just takes one person in a school to do things contrary to the way that everybody else is doing it. And that person to impact me as a parent, and it just goes out of the window. My trust with the new bond and relationship and partnership I've formed with that school becomes meaningless if someone's being horrible to me. So it's got to be across the whole school so you can be there. As I said before, from 4 to 19, we've actually got 22-year-olds in one college using it. So, but from 4 to 19, it has the same format. Obviously, we go around looking at and just making sure everything's fine. I was invited into one school in the Northeast, in Sunderland, and they brought in their champions. Now, you'd expect them to be from Facebook. They were kids. They had a group of kids whose job it was to show other pupils how to use freeflowinfo if they were struggling, or when a parent was new to the school, they'd bring them in and the child would sit down. A child would sit down. So I had this 6-year-old girl telling me all about freeflowinfo and how great it was and how I could be using it. And this, awesome. Absolutely awesome.
That's fantastic. I'm a big advocate for student digital leaders. It sounds like they had a good setup for that within their school. Listen, Alan, I'm mindful of your time. You've shared so many great insights during the course of our conversation today. So thank you very much for all of that. I just want to share where people can find out more. So I've shared a few little links across the bottom here during the course of the conversation. If you want to learn more about Alan's consultancy, then you can visit their website, www.engagementineducation.co.uk. If you wanted to learn more about freeflowinfo, then you can visit the website www.freeflowinfo.co.uk. You can obviously connect with freeflowinfo on Facebook, and if you want to say hello to Alan himself, then you can drop him a line and say hello on his Twitter and imaginatively Alan Cowley. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me for the conversation today, Alan. It's been delightful learning about the difference between parental involvement and parental engagement. You've certainly challenged some of my clear misconceptions around this, although it goes back to one of the things that I read about John Hattie. You mentioned John Hattie before, sharing about the importance of that triangulation between the school, the child, and the home, and how and the additional months and sort of progress that the impact that can have on learning. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to join me, Alan. Was there anything else you wanted to share before we head off for today?
No, I mean, we do believe that free flow info is the answer for a school, but I can understand that there are some schools that don't want to use that. You also asked me, and I didn't finish the question off, about independent schools. And what we find with independent schools is that parents, and this is true of all schools as well, I hasten to add, parents are not aware of the wealth of learning that goes on in schools. One might think that's particularly important if you're paying for it. I don't actually agree with that. It's equally important. But free flow info allows your school to share with your parents, regardless of whether they're paying for it or not. And let's face it, with current financing of schools, that permeates maintained schools as well to some extent. They can see the wealth that their children are receiving in their learning. And that is what free flow info can bring to the independent sector, certainly. It enables you to show the stuff we take for granted. Finally, to finish on an anecdote, and you'll know this when you go into schools, you show them around classrooms and you see magic. And when I'm leaving that classroom, I'll turn to the teacher and say, thank you. That was brilliant. That was wonderful. And they'll say, oh, you think so? Teachers underestimate what goes on in the classroom every day and how skillful they are. You won't be on the camera. It's looking up what the pupil has done. This is not about making television stars out of teachers. It's about showing the learning that has taken place in your classroom. Thanks a lot for talking to me.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Anna. Thank you ever so much indeed. And please do hit the subscribe button if you want to get more content like this on our YouTube channel. If you're watching on there, if you're listening on our podcast, then obviously you can still hit the subscribe button there as well. Thank you again to Alan Cowley from Engagement in Education and about his product Free Flow Info and the importance of parental engagements. Join us on the next episode of NetSupport's Insights. Can't wait to see you. Thanks for joining us.